Hey guys,
Hey,
Like,
how you doing?
good. How's it going?
Doing all right.
Are you enjoying that remote life?
Yeah, hashtag remote life. You can't
How's
see the beachside tiki drink stand, but it's right over here. I don't know where Ray is. God, where's he gonna show up?
That's so awesome.
There he is.
After months of planning, we finally got it together.
That's super cool. Where are you guys like? Is that your house, Deanna, or are you guys out somewhere?
No, we came to this food, like one of these bougie food court situations. Yeah. So we're the people who are the nuisance on the webcams right now, but hopefully minimizing that by being outside. It's like improbably 75 in Baltimore today, which doesn't make any sense.
It's like 40 something in San Diego. It's really weird.
But I think the weather's going to plummet tomorrow or something again.
Yeah, I've been lording this over my collaborators at Berkeley that it's like 31. It was 31 today. We'll get snow this weekend or something, I'm sure.
Not put away the winter coats yet.
Yeah.
Because Rob, you've lived on the East Coast before, right?
I was born there.
Oh, okay. So you know the deal.
It's far too early to suggest that warm weather has really arrived.
But even in March, I get fooled in New York. It's like you'll get like 3 days of 60-degree weather. I'm like, this is great. And then you put everything away, and it's like, nope, I need that heavy sweater for one more week, like early May or something.
Yeah.
I just always think of I went to school in Rochester, and I always think of like late March or April, the first time there'd be a few warm days, and everybody would be out in shorts and a t-shirt. In weather that, like in San Francisco, people are wearing like down jackets, right?
Break
Yeah.
out the fleece.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew a guy who wore Birkenstocks year round in Rochester. You get inured to it.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Or like if you ever go to like Florida in the winter where, you're not guaranteed warm weather, right? And you'll see some people like in shorts and it's like, okay, you're from Canada. And then you see people with like sweaters and stuff and you're like, okay, you're a local.
Yep.
Okay, so Toli is out or he's on the road today. So he just gave me a quick call saying you couldn't make it. But why don't we just jump into it? And I can actually start with his quick updates. The research is going on. So is the training for the report writing, and that's all progressing. But he didn't have much other to report other than that. On my side, there were we finally got the money from Climate Central, which is great. We're sort of reserving it temporarily for some Virginista funding that we need. Stephanie gets back. Sorry about the background noise. Stephanie gets back tomorrow. She's been out for a week. And so I'll just want to sort of run her numbers by, but we probably have some money that we could use for development, but it's getting close to knowing when Packard is. So instead of just like throwing the money at something, I'm sort of inclined to sort of check in with Stephanie, make sure, we have enough money set up for Virginista for the short term. And then we can sort of start thinking about how we want to spend both potentially like any leftover money from Climate Central as well as the Packard grant. And who, is it Kit, is it Pfeiffer, or is it somebody else? And then another quick update is we sent just a very short one-pager concept note to Doris Duke, and they came back and they said this looks interesting to us. And they're more interested in something like around 100K over for 2 years or each, so 200 total. But you have to subtract out the cut that Public Lab gets, and then so that leaves us to like 90 a year. And then I think data they think it's going to go a little more heavier to data together, but we still will probably get something like 35 total, which leaves us around like 75K total for a developer for 2 years at $75,000 a piece. And so that gets us closer.
Between Packard and Doris doing together?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
So that gets us, and I can post some of those numbers now that they're getting a little more firm of what we might expect. That's almost a full-time developer, or maybe 2 part-time developers for a year. We can talk about that split. It doesn't leave much room for product manager, which at this point, we can talk about how much project managing we need, and if it's really the priority of the developer, just to have like a couple people maintaining to make sure that things we have the maintenance, as well as enough like Virginista runway to just keep that transition, so we're not sort of feeling like just pressure of like going running out of money and not being able to pay the bills. But I think we're starting to get clarity of what the funding situation can be for the next couple of years. So I just want to keep on those discussions as we start to talk about the long-term planning of the project. I'm sort of talking fast, I feel like. Do you have any questions on that? Cool. Okay. That's all I had. There's some other updates that'll come lower down that I have, but we can maybe move into the dev updates. Who wants to go first?
I'll be quick. I've just been trying to help organize the page freezer blog posts and stuff. So I taken all the changes from Rob and Toffoli. Thanks a lot for that. It's usually useful. So I think it just needs like one more like glance over just to make sure it look okay. I'm not sure if we want to like hold both things, like the blog post and the retrospective. Like, do they have to go out at the same time, or is it okay to like do the blog post first and then send them the retrospective later? Yeah. And then I gave Dan a poke, and I'm poking him again for the retrospective stuff. But that's
and Toli told me actually, you mentioned on the call, thanks for bringing this up, that he's going to do a final pass on the page freezer blog post.
That's all.
Oh, but also thanks for writing up that issue in GitHub for the best practices.
Oh yeah.
You did a really good job of consolidating a very sort of meandering conversation into an issue, which is super helpful. Yes, we can start tracking against those notes. So that was really, really great. Thank you.
Awesome.
I guess I'll go next. So the oncoming paternity leave, which could at this point really start at any time, is starting to hang over my head in both edgy and day jobs. So I'm struggling to keep up on all fronts a little bit right now. But I've been reviewing Rob's work. I intend to help out with the page freezer thing, and at least taking a final pass. So thanks, Kevin, for really taking the lead on that. I have finally broken ground on the Ansible work. I've been largely just sort of mentally organizing how I want to approach it until recently, and it's going quickly now that it's going. I think it seems to be a pretty good fit. Things are just kind of naturally coming out. So I don't know. I hesitate to put an ETA on that, but hopefully not that much longer, not that many more days until we can have something that works and that is worthy of review from the Internet Archive people. That's where that's at.
Awesome. Thanks. Likewise, so yeah, I've just been running around doing like a lot of admin funding stuff as always. And what I'll try to do is with some of the best practices stuff. That blog post I can definitely take the lead on. I think we have all the parts we've talked about would go into it. I did talk to Liz for a second, and she said she didn't know anything specifically about a great resource. So I think this thing that we're looking for doesn't exist. So maybe we're going to be the ones who sort of write it, which is great. So I'll try to put some more attention on that too. I got good feedback on that script I posted for the AI health check. So I didn't know that db.python script existed. So I'll take time to try to merge into that, which is fine too, because sometimes it's even just for pure, because it's not this rush thing. It was like I learned how to access directly to the API myself, so that's not terrible. Always can learn something. So I'll work on the next iteration on that. But as we get closer to sort of getting ready to do more stuff with AI, this isn't sort of a completely low priority. So the priority is slowly inching up. And is there another? Oh, and the other thing I'm working on too is implementing the new issue template that Dan shared to the main repos, so that there'll be like a issue template for when people try to create a new issue, and you'll start seeing pull requests for that like today. So that's all I got. Rob has many things listed here.
I tried to list it all out again, so it's a little bit clearer like last week. The maintainers and tag stuff is merged and deployed, plus several follow-on hotfixes because of mistakes I made. But it seems to all be working well. The UI stuff for only actually requesting diffs for things that we know we can diff is in. So hopefully that should help things a lot. That only finally got deployed along with the processing side stuff yesterday, so I can't really report back yet on whether it's making a big difference in the rate at which I see problems. But we'll see. And then, the processing side version of that, which is the actual algorithm, stop early and go like, whoa, this doesn't look like HTML. I'm not sure you want me to do an HTML-centric diff on it. So those are all merged and deployed. Adding the sorting query parameter to the API is pending review right now. It's done. I think the big questions there were, is that the right name, and is the formatting of the parameter correct? And it can take a list of things, so you can sort by several things. And should those be one comma separated value, or should they be an array style value? The way we do arrays for like maintainers and tags. So those are sort of the open questions on it, besides just a general code review, but otherwise it's done, having made some basic assumptions. And then because the other processing bug is fixed, that unblocks finishing the outgoing link stuff if I want to work on that, which I would kind of like to get it out of the way. But I've also started looking into, but have not really buckled down and started writing code for handling the pages that exist at multiple URLs. The main thing is trying to figure out the way we canonicalize or format URL keys. So I thought it was interesting when we were talking with Brendan about what Sentry does, because looking at the source code for Sentry, Sentry also uses Cert. What it does is it uses a canonicalization algorithm and then formats it according to Sentry. whereas the Internet Archive, sort of like official Python cert library, doesn't just do formatting, it also does a little bit of canonicalization according to their own rules. So those are very different approaches. I like the idea of separating out the work of canonicalizing from the work of formatting. So I think I will at least follow that. The bigger question is whether like we do our own canonicalization, or we depend on one of the 5 gajillion Ruby libraries that do canonicalization, whether we try and copy Sentry and do a port of Purell, which is the canonicalization he's using. I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense when there's a lot of ones in Ruby. Or whether we just port the canonicalization that's in the sort of Internet Archive Python cert library, but sort of try and pull it out apart a little bit more from the formatting bit. So I got to like look at those a little bit more and weigh that. And I think that's the thorniest part of the work, is writing the canonicalization and formatting algorithm for URL keys. Then the rest is just like adding a column and populating that column for every page, and then deduplicating pages based on it. And that's pretty much all the work that there is. And writing the import algorithm to consult also the URL key as a fallback for an exact page match. But and those parts are all pretty straightforward and easy. There is maybe one open question that I'm curious about, which is in there we talked about, because we're going to be sort of rewriting the URL, we still want to capture the actual URL that content was retrieved from, or at least so far as we know. And I think what we originally talked about, because it was simple and expedient, was just shoving it into the source metadata. And the open question in my head, that's a question to people here, as opposed to I just need to do the research, is does that still make sense, or should it be an actual column on Ruby? Like should it have a more sort of secure and high level place for that sort of like original capture URL to live, rather than just in the metadata blob? That's sort of my big question there. So if anybody has feedback, I would love to hear it. And then otherwise, it's a handful of fixing all the other projects to use tags and maintainers instead of using sites and agents. Everything's backwards compatible in the tags maintainer exchange, so they can continue as long as we want using sites and agencies. But it would be good to move them over and get all those redeployed so that we can actually get rid of the backwards compatible stuff.
I'm inclined to promote the field from source metadata to a first class field. And you didn't explicitly ask for feedback on this. It probably depends on the research you do, but I would guess that we will not be sorry if we take the trouble to encode Internet Archive's exact search scheme, or we'll be chasing down tiny differences forever.
I'm not super worried about the tiny differences, because I think they'll be edge casey, and it may be reasonable for us to treat it slightly differently than them. But I think for the most part, you're probably right, and that's a reasonable approach. So I will take that as highly weighted feedback.
Fair enough. But whatever you find, you'll know more. So that makes sense.
So just quickly, Rob, thank you. That was great. In terms of like you're in a holding pattern for 153 versus like 185. I mean, what do you think the level of effort for 153 is? I mean, if you think it's pretty well scoped out and you just want to bang it out, that sounds fine to me. But you know, I think everyone's eager also to sort of get 185 out of the way so we can, you know, start doing some testing with the Internet Archive. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think you're right that I should probably prioritize 185 in front of it. It's there because the like little part of my brain that is annoyed at things that sit there for a long time unfinished is very annoyed at that one. I don't think the level of work is very high,
Right.
but it's still like some work because it's all done on my local. It's just really crappily done. And so it does have to be like cleaned up. It's not a huge deal because I think all the questions were resolved. We got good answers to them. We know what we want it to do and look like, and we're not worrying about the colors part, which is unresolved. But it is still like stuff to do, right? And like make the grade. So I think you're right. I should not prioritize it, even though like part of my brain is just so annoyed by it being there that I want to. I should.
Right.
So yes, thank you.
Okay, why don't we switch that up? But it's still important work. So I don't want to, I don't want your brain, that part of your brain, to think that it's never going to get done. Because we would all like to get it done too. So that sounds good, and we can just track progress of the week, and if we can figure out the order. We can tweak the order of work as we go.
Yeah, I think in terms of time estimate wise, the multiple URL cert stuff, I think will take me a full evening of work to get the cert part done, if not two. And so I think the overall work I probably won't finish before Sunday, but if I wind up having a good amount of time, then hopefully I will get it done on Saturday before Sunday. On the outside, it's more like by this time next week.
Right. That would be amazing. Excellent. Thank you. So moving on, DataKind, there's still like low-level activity. I do need to check in on them. They were supposed to meet on last Sunday, and I got invited to that meeting, but I wasn't able to join it because of the time. But I'll see what they're doing. So AI is still on hold. When we're ready to send them the Ansible stuff, we will. Page Freezer blog post and retrospective is coming along. I did talk to the Cyberlaw Clinic. They were supposed to give me a draft by today. I'll see if there was a hold up on that. But they did ask some interesting questions, like did we want to watermark Scanner, so that if someone takes screenshots of it, it would be watermarked sort of like the Google Maps watermark kind of thing. Because if this is for really other people using it, but, or if it gets circulated, we want the scanner to be sort of stamped that it's coming from Scanner. Something to think about that we don't need to decide today. And then there are also other larger issues that we need to talk about, like not just us, obviously, but also with Tolly and the other group. The groups really, even like maybe even edgy-wise of like who owns the annotations in terms of the intellectual property of the work being produced with the tool, stuff like that. More administrative thing is we need to list a copyright agent if anyone has a problem with, because we are sort of storing other people's websites and displaying them. Some people might have problems with that in a copyright way, even if it's grounded or not, but they still might file something against us, and we need to list a person who should be that contact person, and we can figure out who that is. Potentially we'll need a privacy policy. Right now we're not storing much user data. I think right now it's just a username, but at some point we might want to have even like a full first and last name, and if regardless of what information we do hold, we need some sort of policy in place on like what we're going to do or not do with that data. And then finally, do we want terms of use on how the limits of the output of scanners used by external parties? Is it for non-commercial use only? Is it you can do whatever you want with it? Is it only for nonprofit or academic institutions? I don't think it'll go that far because we want journalists potentially using it, but it's another thing that we will need to think about. Obviously, Tolly has been out, and I didn't bring this up yet at the analyst conversation, so there's a lot of conversations to sort of have around this stuff, but I I just wanted to get the ball rolling in that. Were there any questions on the legal stuff? Yep, Kevin?
Will this be stuff that should be brought up in the all edgy meeting? Not tomorrow, but sometime coming up soon.
Oh yeah, definitely. I just wanted to circulate those ideas just internally, just to get a pulse of what like the internal team is and the analysts too, because we're all using and working and improving the tool, and I think everyone has ownership for it. And it's great just to get, I think, that aligned before we share it with the larger group too, because sometimes it's nice to get everyone sort of all ideas out on the table. And then certainly when we have the terms of use sort of written in, that'll also get sort of circulated to the steering committee too, so that they get, I'm sure they'll have to do some sort. When I say they, I mean you, right? We'll have some sign off on it as well. So yeah, they'll definitely be that was a long answer to say. The short answer is yes, they will be involved in the decision-making process for the terms of use.
It's a really interesting point about storing annotations and ownership, which I hadn't even considered at all. So I'm glad somebody.
That's why they're there. Yeah, that's why they're there.
And then I think it would be a good idea for someone, not me because I really don't feel like I have the time right now, to get with Mark Graham and ask you to introduce him to the guy at Internet Archive who handles all the legal deposition stuff and questions around copyright, because it's an important point about us storing copies of web pages. Theoretically, because they're government pages, they're public domain anyway, but super useful to have some feedback or advice from people who deal with it all the time and who are regularly in court as a result of it. So we should do that to better understand the parameters of the problem. And there's also a really good point to consider in where, as we're talking about bringing in Internet Archive data, I know Dan's original thought approach was that the way we currently we can point to a canonical URI for data as coming from anywhere. And currently that's always a place under our control. That's a S3 archive. And his thinking was that for Internet Archive, we would just point to the Internet Archive URL. And I know my thinking had been, no, we'd make a copy of it because that way we're less load on them and it's faster, because sometimes Internet Archive can be kind of slow to pull up older content. But maybe this is depending on what we hear from them, maybe it's a good point to say we should not do that. We should just point directly at them so that we don't have to worry about that problem. We still have to worry about it with the Versionista data, but we can worry about it less. We can reduce the surface area of exposure.
Of risk, exactly.
But I think it would be good to hear feedback about whether that's even something to be worried about, as long as it's government websites from Internet Archive folks. So, yeah, but that's a good, also specific thing to ask about.
Yeah, I'm in contact with Mark, so I'll hit him up in Slack and see if he can point us to the right person to talk to. But that's a great suggestion.
Just really quickly, I had a question for Rob. What's the difference between the canonicalization and formatting? Just so I could understand it.
So canonicalization is saying here is our theoretical truest, most canonical, this is the URL where this content lives, even though you could retrieve it from all these other URLs where they've got a hash on the end, or from HTTP or HTTPS, or with a www dot in front of it or not. So the question of which of those things is included, or what the most right place for the content to live, is the question of canonicalization. And then the question of formatting is that CERT formats a URL. One of its goals is in in the acronym because it's sort-friendly URL reordering transform. So it's to be sort-friendly. It doesn't have a protocol, and it's organized by biggest category first. So it's organized by top level domain, second level domain, third level domain, unlike a HTTP protocol formatted domain, which is n level, n-1 level, n-2 level, third level, second level, first level. And then paths are 1, 2, 3, 4. So like we have this going in and then going out in terms of how URLs are ordered. And in CERT, they're flipped around. And then there's some different delimiters between parts of the URL instead of dots or slashes. So it's just formatting, just like the way the same information is presented versus changing the information that we are presenting. That's canonicalization. And here's like the most right place for this piece of content, which may be a different actual URL than the URL we captured it from. And then formatting is just like reordering it and changing the symbols, but it's still the same data.
That was a great question, Kevin, and that would raise another question. So like, what's an example of then it not being in the place where we got it from? Like,
so some easy examples. Like the easiest one is HTTP versus HTTPS. Because most sites will present the exact same content over those two protocols at the same URL. They don't have to. So like if you want to be really technical about it, every URL is potentially different content, right? But the point of this is to say those URLs are almost certainly the same content. And then we're trying to also give ourselves an avenue for safely backing out of that in the edge cases we find where they're not. But so HTTP versus HTTPS is a really easy one, right? Almost all the time it's the same thing. So it doesn't matter which of those you use, it's the same content. And it's also a somewhat arbitrary choice over which one's more canonical. I think we've said HTTPS is more canonical because I think the world has generally agreed now that it is a better protocol for communicating data for a lot of reasons. So we're going to consider that one to be more canonical than HTTP. But same content, different URL. Canonical would be with HTTPS. So that's an easy example. Another example is that very commonly www and like no subdomain are the same, right? Or like www and www1 and www2 and www3 are the same. So like one of the things built into CERT is www any number is the same as www. Another one is like a slash at the end. Or like a hash anything at the end. Yeah. You could strip all those off and 90% of the time they're the same thing.
Nice. Yeah, super helpful. Okay. Great. Good question, Kevin. Cool. So we're a little bit over. I think we ran through a lot fairly quickly, which is great. I think we can tie it up unless anyone has any last comments. Otherwise, we can call it a day. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll see everyone around.
Yeah.
Bye.